Under the cold glow of the holo display in the Intergalactic Concord Academy's Ethics Hall, the footage began. A tranquil scene filled the massive screen. A white-robed Zenari monk, a member of a famously pacifist species, stood still, humming a gentle melodic tune that seemed to soothe the very air. From the bottom of the frame, a pair of gloved human hands appeared, raising a blunt military sidearm. The tune ended abruptly with a soft, muffled shot. The monk fell silently, his lifeless body folding to the ground like crumpled silk. A wave of gasps rippled through the hall. No one had expected the lecture on battlefield ethics to begin with an execution. "Professor, that wasn't a case study. That was murder," snapped Leorin, a towering avian cadet with a crest of iridescent feathers now standing straight in alarm. His voice cracked with outrage. Behind the podium stood Professor Rovar, a hulking walrus-like Baron whose scarred back and dull tusks spoke of decades in command. He didn't flinch. His chipped tusks clicked once before his gravel-deep voice answered, "Noted, Cadet." He gestured to the screen. That was Case Study Alpha. All final footage is from a single operative. To one side, the containment shell housing Cadet Thress, a translucent jelly-like Lumari, flickered with sickly yellow pulses, a clear sign of distress. The Lumari species couldn't process violence well. To them, it was like physical poison. Proceeding to Case Study Beta, Rovar continued, tone flat and unshaken. The display shifted. The soldier's chest cam now moved across a scorched, shimmering wasteland. In the center stood a towering structure. Like a crystalline tree woven from threads of light and glass, veins of bioluminescence pulsing gently along its trunk. The hum it emitted was ancient, almost divine. "By the stars?" Leorin whispered, awe momentarily replacing his fury. "A living world spire. I've read of them, but never seen one fully grown." On screen, the soldier lifted a large dispersal weapon. A jet of orange chemicals sprayed across the structure. Wherever it touched, the radiant bark sizzled and melted into sludge. The tree's song warped into a gurgling, sickening hiss. "No!" Leorin shouted, standing again. "That wasn't strategy. That was the destruction of sacred life." From the back row, a Jakrell cadet muttered with disdain. "Humans. Always destroyers. It's bred into them." Rovar remained silent. "Case Study Gamma," he said. The final footage began. The screen now shook violently. The camera jostled with each of the soldiers' steps, weaving through the smoking aftermath of a brutal firefight. The ground was littered with wounded soldiers, all clad in the same dark combat armor. The cam stopped at one who groaned, clutching his leg. "Sarge, my leg. I can't feel it." The soldier knelt. His sidearm rose into frame again, aimed this time at one of his own. A flash. Another body fell still. A chorus of horror erupted in the lecture hall. Cadet Thress's containment suit went dark. His entire bioluminescent system had shut down. The Lumari had fainted. On screen, the soldier moved methodically from one wounded comrade to the next. One pleaded, "Wait, no, please." The sound of a final muffled shot cut him short. "His gauntlet?" Someone choked out, pointing at the frozen frame now displayed. Etched crudely into the armored glove was a symbol, a jackal's head, grinning wide, the eyes hollow, the smile grotesque. Leorin's feathers bristled like daggers. "That's the mark of the Black Jackals, the 13th Recon Unit. I've heard the rumors. They're not soldiers. They're nightmares." Before the room could process more, the hall doors slid open with a hiss, casting a harsh strip of corridor light into the darkness. Professor Rovar's tusks clicked again. "The crucible is set," he murmured. A figure entered the room, human, dressed in the plain gray of a liaison officer. His posture was rigid, his steps calculated. He didn't speak. He made his way to the far end of the room, to his usual seat, the one against the wall, where no one could ever sit behind him. All eyes were on him now. The hollow projector's glow reflected off the insignia stitched to his shoulder, a jackal's head, identical to the one etched on the killer's gauntlet. The room went dead silent. Cadet Thress's suit, which had just begun to flicker faintly with returning light, shut down again completely. Leorin, still standing, turned slowly. His wide eyes moved between the paused footage and the man now seated silently beneath it. His beak hung open. He raised a trembling hand, pointing. "You? That's your unit. That's your mark. You're the one." The human didn't react. For a moment, he simply stared at Leorin with a look that held no malice, no shame, only deep, bone-deep exhaustion. Then, without a word, he turned his back to the cadet, walking calmly toward the lectern beside Professor Rovar, his silence louder than any confession. Unmoving, the human cadet stood beneath the hollow projector's harsh glow. "Professor," he said quietly, voice raw like old gravel. It wasn't a request. Professor Rovar gave the barest nod, surrendering the floor. The soldier's fingers moved with precision, rewinding the footage. He froze the image on the serene figure of the white-robed Zanari monk. "What you're seeing," said the cadet, Kalan now, his name resonating like a weight dropped into still water, "is a shell. The monk who once lived in that body died 3 days before I ever pulled the trigger. That was a Kari shepherd, one of the Mindwalkers. A parasite in skin it didn't earn." He paused. That melody wasn't a hymn. It was a broadcast. A hive command driving nearly 3 million Zanari in the Undercity to march straight into our defenses. Human shields, puppets. One shot ended the transmission, set them free. The silence that followed was no longer judgmental. It was haunted. Faces that had burned with outrage now stared hollow-eyed at the screen. Kalan didn't let the moment stretch. He switched to the second video, the glowing crystalline tree. "Your sacred world spire was 30 minutes from a full bloom," he said. "When a Gaian seed fruits, it doesn't birth life. It liquefies everything around it, plant, animal, colonist, turns entire biospheres into spawning vats." He looked straight at Leorin. 80,000 civilians. I stopped the bloom. My defoliant gave them another morning. Before the silence could resettle, he triggered the final footage, the cold execution of his squad. For the first time, his controlled expression wavered. A small tremor ran down his jawline. "My unit," he said, the words scraping against something painful. "We got hit with weavers. Microscopic. Burrow into your nerves, rewrite your brain. There's no cure, no treatment. You stop being you in under an hour. Then you start again. As bait, it uses your voice, your memories, cries like your child, pleads like your father." He mimed a sharp, explosive gesture with his hand. One step too close, and it blooms. Spores everywhere. His eyes dropped to the floor. "We were point unit for the evacuation fleet, 150,000 civilians behind us. One infected making it through, it would have ended everything. I gave my team clean deaths before they could become weapons." He looked back up, voice low. "That's what we do. We weigh hearts." The room was frozen. No one spoke. The only sound was the faint whir of the projector cooling. Leorin remained standing, but his proud feathers had fallen flat against his neck. Kalan stepped away from the lectern, the air thick around him like a storm cloud that refused to break. He returned to his seat, shoulders heavy, face turned inward, as if the weight of his words had collapsed the very air around him. He sat back in silence, alone. Professor Rovar stepped forward, his every footfall like a drumbeat in the stillness. He scanned the cadets, most still paralyzed by what they'd seen and heard. "They weigh hearts," he said, voice like stone grinding stone. "That's the 13th's motto. You think it means judging others. It doesn't. The heart they weigh is always their own." He nodded toward Kalan. "They go where victory is already dead, where winning doesn't exist. Not to triumph, but to keep the rest of us from drowning. They measure their souls against millions of lives, and they pay, every single time." Rovar's gaze hardened like iron forged in regret. "Your Honor? That's a luxury bought with their damnation. This lesson isn't about whether you approve of what Sergeant Kalan did. It's about whether you're brave enough to live with what he saved you from. Ask yourself, would your honor survive his choices? Or are you just lucky someone else carries that burden for you?" He turned away. Class dismissed. The cadets filed out slowly, avoiding Kalan as if he radiated something sacred and dangerous all at once. A wide berth formed around him, not out of fear, but reverence. No one met his eyes. No one said a word, except for one. Leorin, the once indignant, once proud Centauri, stopped in front of Kalan's seat. The human sat motionless, eyes closed. Leorin inhaled, straightened his posture to its full formal height, then gave a single, deliberate bow from the neck. A warrior's salute to a soul he now recognized as heavier than his own. No words. Just that silent gesture of deepest respect. Then he too turned and walked out of the darkness, leaving Kalan, the jackal, to his lonely watch.